He fired her as if she was nothing. Little did he know, he was firing his new boss. This isn't just a story about a rich man and his maid. It's the story of a billionaire who built an empire on arrogance, and the woman he humiliated who happened to have a secret identity. What happens when the most powerful man in the city discovers his destiny is in the hands of the person he despised most? This is a journey of revenge, redemption, and a plot twist that will leave you in shock. We've all felt invisible or underestimated at some point. We've all questioned if kindness truly matters in a world that seems to reward cruelty. This story hits that exact pain point and proves that sometimes the universe has a much bigger plan. You're about to meet Norman Robertson, the ruthless CEO, and Rachel Romero, the maid he never bothered to truly see. Get ready for an emotional roller coaster, because their love story begins with a termination and ends with a multi-billion-dollar takeover. Their journey is proof that true love can be the sweetest revenge and the deepest redemption. But before the shocking reveal, there will be drama, betrayal, and tests of character that will make you question everything. Every scene is a piece of a puzzle leading to a life-changing, surprise ending. What you're about to see isn't just a video, it's a reminder of the power of destiny and true love. So if you believe everyone deserves a second chance and that life has a funny way of settling the score, then you're already part of our community. Comment the word destiny right now if you're ready for this journey. Like this video is a sign that you value kindness. Share it with someone who needs a story of hope, and subscribe, because you won't want to miss a second of what comes next. The silence in Norman Robertson's penthouse was a weapon, and he wielded it with surgical precision. It was broken only by the clink of a crystal glass set down with a little too much force on the marble coaster. That was it. The mistake. A sound, a fractional error in an ocean of quiet servitude. For this, Rachel Romero was about to be fired. The rich man's face, a mask of cold fury, turned to her, and the air grew impossibly colder, thick with a drama only he seemed to relish. Are you incompetent or merely stupid? Norman's voice was low, yet it cut through the expansive room, designed to humiliate. He gestured at the coaster, now a symbol of her ultimate failure in his eyes. Rachel stood motionless, her gaze steady, refusing to flinch before the billionaire's tirade. This wasn't a disciplinary action, it was a display of power, a casual reminder that to him, she was a disposable object. He enjoyed seeing people break, but he would find no satisfaction here today. He continued his verbal assault, each word chosen to dismantle her dignity. He spoke of perfection, of standards, of the price of failure in his world. To him, this was just another Tuesday, another employee made an example of. The world was full of people waiting to take her place. People who wouldn't make such a careless grating sound. Rachel Romero, the quiet maid, was just another line item he could afford to delete from his life's ledger. It was a kindness test in its most brutal form, and in that moment, Norman failed spectacularly. He saw only a maid, not the woman who organized his chaos with quiet grace. He didn't see the person who knew which files had need before he asked, or who remembered the names of his estranged sister's children. He saw a flawed tool, and his solution was simple: throw it away. "You're fired," he said, the words hanging in the air with a chilling finality. The scene was shockingly emotional, even for the other staff members who pretended not to watch from the hallways. They had seen his temper before, but this was a new level of cruel. To be dismissed over nothing, to be treated as less than human, was a fate they all feared. Norman Robertson wasn't just a boss, he was a tyrant in a bespoke suit, a rich man whose heart was as sterile as his minimalist decor. He believed this was the end of the story. But as Rachel simply nodded, her expression unreadable, a strange thing happened. There was no pleading, no tears, no dramatic exit. She simply turned to leave, her dignity intact, a silent rebuke to his tantrum. Her quiet strength was a surprise, an unexpected plot twist in his carefully scripted power play. For a fleeting second, Norman felt a flicker of something other than Angela, profound and unsettling emptiness in the space she was leaving behind. This act, meant to assert his dominance, felt strangely hollow. He had won, hadn't he? He had removed the imperfection from his perfect world. Yet, the silence that returned to the penthouse felt different now. It was heavier, lonelier. He had fired his maid, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a mistake far more significant than a misplaced glass. A mistake whose consequences were tied to a destiny he couldn't possibly foresee. Norman Robertson's life was a fortress of solitude, built from glass, steel, and billion-dollar deals. His evenings were carbon copies of one another, a silent ride up the private elevator, a sterile apartment that looked more like a showroom than a home, and a view of a city he owned but did not belong to. He equated net worth with self-worth, a dangerous equation that left no room for human connection. The drama of his life was not in romance, but in quarterly earnings reports. His employees were pawns on a chessboard, pieces to be moved and, when necessary, sacrificed for the win. He'd often stare out his office window, not admiring the skyline, but calculating the cost of the human machinery that ran his empire. "Cut the bottom 10, he'd say to his VPs, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's not personal, it's performance." To him, people were numbers, and their lives were mere footnotes in the grand narrative of his success as a billionaire. There was no true love story in his past, only a series of strategic alliances and convenient arrangements. Women were accessories chosen for their beauty and pedigree, but none had ever been allowed past the polished exterior to the man underneath. He believed love was a liability, a messy, unpredictable variable that could compromise a man's focus. The only partner he trusted was his own ambition, a cold companion in his empty, echoing life. This rich man's world was meticulously curated to prevent any form of emotional vulnerability. His art was abstract, his furniture was sharp-angled, and his heart was shielded by layers of cynicism. He mistook fear for respect and loyalty for a well-negotiated contract. He couldn't understand that true strength wasn't about being untouchable, but about having something, or someone, worth being vulnerable for. His isolation was a prison of his own making, and he held the key without realizing he was locked inside. The shocking part wasn't his wealth, but the profound poverty of his spirit. He had everything a man could want, yet he had nothing that truly mattered. He ate meals prepared by a private chef, alone at a table set for 12, the silence his only guest. He celebrated victories by acquiring another company or another expensive toy, each purchase a temporary balm on a wound he refused to acknowledge. His life lacked a soul, a warmth he wouldn't even recognize. He often wondered, in rare moments of unguarded thought, why satisfaction was so fleeting. Each triumph felt hollow almost immediately after it was achieved. He was playing a game only he understood, a relentless pursuit of more that left him feeling less. The destiny he was building for himself was a lonely one, a towering monument to a man who had conquered the world but had lost any chance at genuine happiness along the way. It was a life-changing realization waiting to happen, but he was too busy, too driven, too blind to see it. He believed his path was set, that his cold, calculated existence was the only way to maintain his empire. He had no idea that a plot twist was already in motion, orchestrated by a destiny he had so carelessly dismissed in the form of a humble maid. Topic 3. Rachel, living humbly, is consistently kind and observant, quietly taking notes on the inner workings of Norman's company and the character of his staff. Away from the sterile opulence of Norman's world, Rachel Romero lived a life rich in things money couldn't buy. Her small apartment was filled with the warmth of well-oiled books, the scent of fresh coffee, and the quiet dignity of a life lived with purpose. She treated the local baker with the same respect she'd been forced to show a billionaire, a simple kindness test she passed daily without a thought. Her world was smaller, yes, but infinitely more connected to the pulse of humanity. She was more than just a maid, she was a quiet observer, a ghost in the corporate machine. While cleaning the offices of Robertson Industries after hours, she saw the company's true soul. She saw the executive who stole ideas from interns, the secretary who secretly paid for a coworker's medical bills, and the security guard who practiced his smile in the reflection of the glass doors. She was undercover, hiding in plain sight, absorbing the truth of the place. Every night, she would return home and open a simple notebook. In it, she documented not gossip, but character. She wrote about the small acts of kindness and the quiet moments of cruelty. She analyzed business strategies. She overheard in passing and mapped out the complex web of alliances and rivalries within the staff. This was no mere diary, it was a dossier, a secret identity hidden behind a quiet and unassuming demeanor. Her mission was deeply personal, a slow-burning quest for something more than justice. She was gathering intelligence, but not for blackmail or revenge in the traditional sense. It was for understanding. She needed to know if the heart of the company was as cold as the man who ran it. Was there any hope for redemption within these glass walls? Or was the entire structure rotten to the core? This was her secret, a burden and a purpose she carried alone. This period was a life-changing deep dive into the human condition. She saw ambition curdle into greed and witnessed fear masquerade as loyalty. But she also saw resilience and quiet integrity in the most unexpected places. It was a complicated drama, and she was its most astute audience. Her observations were shaping a plan, a final act that no one, least of all Norman Robertson, could ever see coming. Her notes were filled with insights that would have been worth a fortune to any of Norman's competitors. She understood the company's operational weaknesses and its hidden strengths better than most of the board members. It was a shocking amount of intel for a maid to possess, but Rachel was playing a long game. She was waiting for the perfect moment, for destiny to present an opportunity. And as she documented the company's DNA, she was also documenting the character of its leader. Every outburst, every rare and fleeting moment of humanity, every cold-hearted decision was recorded. She was painting a portrait of Norman Robertson, not as the world saw him, but as he truly was when he thought no one of consequence was watching. It was a portrait that would soon be unveiled in the most dramatic way possible. The dinner party was a parade of Norman's world-old money, new tech and ruthless ambition, all dressed in designer clothing. Rachel was there, not as a guest, but as part of the hired serving staff, a familiar face in an invisible role. It was here that a snobbish guest, a woman dripping in diamonds and condescension, decided to make an example of her. "Oh, you're the one, my friend," said Norman, fired. The woman sneered, loud enough for the nearby circle to hear. "I'm surprised he let you back on the property." The intent was clear: to humiliate Rachel, to put the help back in her place. A hush fell over the group as all eyes turned to the maid, expecting tears or a flustered retreat. Norman himself watched from across the room, a flicker of annoyance on his face at this unwelcome drama. He expected weakness. He expected her to crumble, reaffirming his decision to have fired her. He was about to get a major surprise. Instead of shrinking, Rachel met the woman's gaze with a calm, unwavering smile. "Mr. Robertson values efficiency," she said, her voice even and clear. "And I'm one of the most efficient people he knows." Sometimes, even the best assets get momentarily misplaced. Her response was a masterclass in poisite, was intelligent, disarming, and subtly turned the insult back on the guest's own lack of grace, all without a single drop of malice. The snobbish woman was left speechless, her attack completely neutralized. The surrounding guests, impressed by Rachel's sharp intellect, quickly changed the subject, leaving the aggressor looking foolish and petty. Norman watched the entire exchange, and for the first time, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't expected: respect. He had intended to break her spirit, yet here she was, in the lion's den, utterly unfazed. It was a plot twist in his perception of her. He couldn't reconcile the image of the disposable maid with the composed, intelligent woman who had just commanded the respect of his powerful peers. It was a shocking disconnect. He had dismissed her as insignificant, yet she possessed a quiet strength that many of his executives lacked. This momentary encounter was more compelling than a business deal being discussed that night. It was an emotional spark in his cold, calculated world. This single moment was a pivotal chapter in their undeclared love story. It was the instant the rich man began to see the woman, not just the uniform. Her grace under fire was a life-changing revelation for him, a crack in the armor of his prejudice. He found himself thinking about her for the rest of the evening, the surprise of her resilience replaying in his mind. He wouldn't admit it to anyone, least of all himself, but he was deeply impressed. Her ability to handle that public humiliation with such dignity planted a seed of curiosity. Who was Rachel Romero? He had stripped her of her job and her dignity, or so he thought. But she carried her own worth within her, and for the first time, Norman Robertson began to wonder what that was truly worth. Panic was an unfamiliar and unwelcome emotion for Norman Robertson, but it was currently consuming him. A vital contract, the linchpin of a massive merger, was gone. He had torn his office apart, his usual cold demeanor replaced by a frantic, accusatory rage. And his fury found an easy target. "It was you," he snarled at Rachel, who had been called in to help find it. "You were the last one in here. This is some kind of petty revenge, isn't it?" He was ready for a fight, for denials, for tears. He wanted someone to blame, a scapegoat for his own carelessness. The drama he was creating was a shield for his own foolishness, and he was determined to prove that the maid he had fired was not only incompetent, but also vindictive. But Rachel refused to participate in his theater of blame. She didn't defend herself or rise to the bait, a response that was in itself a shocking plot twist for him. Instead, she simply said, "Let's just think, Norman. Where was the last place you felt confident you had it?" Her use of his first name was a quiet assertion of equality in that moment of crisis, and her calmness was a stark contrast to his emotional outburst. She began to guide him through his own actions, her questions gentle but probing. "Were you on the phone? Did you walk over to the window? What was in your other hand?" Slowly, methodically, she helped him reconstruct the last hour. He followed her lead, his anger slowly receding, replaced by a grudging cooperation. She wasn't just cleaning up his mess, she was cleaning up his mind, organizing his chaotic thoughts. He was the billionaire CEO, yet in that moment, she was the one in control, navigating him through his own failure of memory. It was an unexpected reversal of roles. And then, there it was. The document wasn't stolen or hidden. It was sitting on the corner of his bookshelf, right next to a photo of his late father, a place he had put it himself while on a distracting phone call. The silence that followed was deafening. Norman stared at the folder, the evidence of his own stupidity, and then at Rachel. The feeling of being a fool was intense, a hot flush of shame that he hadn't felt in years. This quiet act of competence was more humbling than any shouted accusation could ever be. She hadn't said "I told you so." She hadn't even looked smug. She had simply helped him solve a problem he created, a problem for which he had viciously blamed her. This wasn't about a lost document anymore, it was about character. It was an emotional and life-changing lesson in grace, delivered by the last person he expected. He mumbled a thank you, unable to meet her eyes. She just nodded and left the office, leaving him alone with his misplaced contract and his profoundly misplaced judgment. He was the rich man, the master of the universe, but he had been completely outmaneuvered by a quiet maid's simple, unwavering dignity. His perception of her was undergoing a seismic shift, and he was left feeling more lost than ever. The pressure on Norman was immense. A key product line was failing, and a multi-million-dollar marketing strategy was collapsing in real time. He was on a conference call, his voice tight with frustration, pacing his office like a caged lion. "Your solutions are predictable and expensive," he barked into the phone. "I need a new angle, something nobody is seeing." The drama was high, and his team of highly paid strategists was coming up empty. He was losing, and he hated losing more than anything. From the adjoining room, where she was quietly polishing a glass table, Rachel Romero heard everything. She heard the flawed logic from his marketing team. She heard the desperation in Norman's voice. And having spent months observing the company from the inside out, from the mailroom to the boardroom, she saw the answer. It was simple, elegant, and rooted in a human truth his team had completely overlooked. It was a solution no billionaire would ever think of. Later that night, long after Norman had gone home in a cloud of frustration, Rachel entered his silent office. This was a bold, risky move. She was no longer just an observer, she was about to intervene. On a plain sheet of paper from a legal pad, she wrote down her idea. It was just a few sentences, anonymous and direct, outlining a strategy that was the polar opposite of his team's complicated and costly plan. Her secret identity as a brilliant strategist was about to make its debut. She folded the note and placed it squarely in the center of his large, empty desk. It was a small white flag in a sea of dark mahogany, impossible to miss. As she looked at it, she knew this was a critical move in her undercover mission. It was a test. Not a kindness test this time, but a test of his ego. Would the great Norman Robertson be able to recognize a good idea even if it came from an unknown, humble source? Or would his pride blind him? This anonymous note was a seed of a plot twist, a quiet act of rebellion and genius. It wasn't about saving Norman or his company. It was about proving a point that wisdom isn't always found in expensive boardrooms or Ivy League degrees. Sometimes it's found in the quiet corners, in the people you make a point of never seeing. She was offering a lifeline, and he would have no idea who it came from. She left the office without a sound, her heart beating a little faster. She had just interfered with destiny, given it a little nudge in a new direction. The fate of a massive business deal now rested on how a rich man would react to a piece of paper. It was a gamble, but Rachel had learned that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most life-changing rewards. The note sat there in the moonlight, a silent testament to the woman he thought he had fired and forgotten. It held a solution that could save him millions, a secret passed from the invisible to the all-powerful. The stage was set for a shocking surprise, and Norman Robertson was about to walk right into it, completely unaware of the true architect of his potential salvation. Norman arrived the next morning, his mood as dark as his coffee. He saw the note immediately, an anomaly in his perfectly ordered space. His first instinct was to throw it away. An unsolicited suggestion was an insult to his intelligence. But something made him pause. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the few handwritten lines. The idea was so simple, so counterintuitive to everything his team had proposed, that it was almost laughable. And yet, it was brilliant. He spent the next hour dissecting the anonymous strategy. It was a kindness test for his own intellect. Could he set aside his ego and embrace an idea that wasn't his? The note suggested shifting the focus from selling a luxury product to solving a simple emotional problem for the customer. It was a human-centric approach, something his profit-driven mind rarely considered. Against his better judgment, he decided to make the call. Scrap the old plan, he ordered his team. We're trying something new. The implementation was swift. His marketing team, though confused by the sudden change in direction, followed the orders of the billionaire. The new campaign launched within 48 hours. The results were not just positive, they were shockingly explosive. Sales skyrocketed. The failing product line was suddenly the company's biggest success story. The multi-million-dollar deal, he thought, was lost was not only saved, but was now more profitable than he had ever imagined. His executives were stunned, patting each other on the back and trying to take credit for the mysterious new strategy. Norman let them. He leaned back in his chair, a rare smile playing on his lips. He had won, spectacularly. But a nagging question remained, a puzzle that intrigued him more than the victory itself. Who was the ghost in his machine? Who had the audacity and the brilliance to leave that note on his desk? It was the ultimate undercover operation, a stroke of genius delivered from the shadows. He had security check the camera footage from his office, but the critical hours were mysteriously corrupted, small, deliberate act of electronic sabotage by someone who knew the system well. The source of the idea remained a secret, a thrilling plot twist in his otherwise predictable corporate drama. He had a secret ally, a mind that seemed to understand his business in a profound way. This event marked a life-changing shift in his perspective. For the first time, he was forced to admit that he didn't have all the answers, that brilliance could come from anywhere. He became obsessed with the identity of his anonymous savior, never once suspecting the truth. The irony was almost poetic. The rich man, saved by the maid he had fired and humiliated, was now desperately searching for the mind of the very woman he believed was mindless. He had no idea that his professional redemption was authored by Rachel Romero. He was celebrating a victory she had handed him, a gift from a person he deemed worthless. The seeds of their strange and unconventional love story were being sown. In the fertile ground of this corporate mystery, a romance built on a secret identity and an anonymous act of genius. The mystery of the note gnawed at Norman. His mind, trained to solve complex problems, was now fixated on a human one. This obsession made him more observant, more aware of the people moving in the periphery of his world. And his gaze kept landing on Rachel Romero. He started to watch her, not as a boss watches an employee, but as a man watches a puzzle he is desperate to solve. He was looking for a genius, and he was starting to wonder if one could hide in plain sight. He began to notice things he had previously ignored. He saw the way she diffused a tense argument between two executives with a few calm words and a well-timed offer of coffee. He saw her return a lost wallet to a frantic intern who had been terrified of being fired over the mistake. Each action was a small kindness test, and she passed every single one with a quiet grace that was both unassuming and powerful. It was her dignity that struck him the most. She never complained, never gossiped, never seemed rushed or flustered. She moved through his chaotic, high-stakes world like a calming presence, an anchor of serenity in a sea of ambition and drama. His cold exterior, the armor he had worn for years, was beginning to feel the heat of a slow-burning respect. This wasn't just a maid, this was a woman of substance. A flicker of something akin to a budding romance began to stir within him, an unfamiliar and unsettling warmth. He found himself looking for her, his eyes scanning a room until he found her quiet presence. He started making small talk, asking her opinion on trivial matters just to hear her speak. Her answers were always simple, yet laced with a profound wisdom that surprised him every time. This was a life-changing shift for a man who only valued loud, confident voices. One afternoon, he saw her sitting in the break room, reading a book on advanced economic theory. It was a shocking sight. He stood for a moment, unseen, watching her. The book was dense, complex, something his own Ivy League-educated analyst would struggle with. The pieces began to click in his mind, forming a picture he wasn't quite ready to accept. The brilliant note, the quiet wisdom, the unexpected intelligence. Could it be her? This growing admiration was a dangerous development in the cold, sterile world of the billionaire. Feelings were a complication he had always avoided, but his respect for Rachel was growing into something more, something he couldn't control. He started to feel a protective instinct towards her, a desire to shield her from the harshness of his world, a world he himself had created. He was a rich man on the verge of an emotional awakening. The woman he had once fired and humiliated was now the subject of his intense fascination. Destiny was playing a very clever game, weaving a love story from the threads of pride and prejudice. Norman Robertson was beginning to see Rachel Romero, truly see her, and what he saw was starting to look a lot like his future. In the competitive Shark Tank of Robertson Industries, any shift in the leader's attention is noticed. A jealous executive named Marcus Thorne, a man whose ambition far outstripped his talent, had watched Norman's growing fascination with the Maid with increasing alarm. He saw Rachel not as a person, but as a threat. Her quiet competence and the CEO's newfound respect for her were a direct challenge to his own carefully constructed position of influence. Marcus was a master of corporate drama and backalley tactics. He knew Norman's fatal flaw, his quick temper, and his tendency to believe the worst in people, especially those he deemed beneath him. So he devised a plan for revenge, a cruel plot to destroy Rachel's credibility and re-establish his own importance in Norman's eyes. He would frame her, not for something malicious, but for a simple, careless mistake, kind of error a mere maid would make. The plan was both simple and insidious. Marcus used a moment of distraction to access Rachel's janitorial login credentials on a shared terminal. From there, he initiated a significant data transfer to an unsecured server, a major security breach that would trigger every alarm in the IT department. He then carefully erased his own digital footprints, leaving a clear and obvious trail pointing directly back to Rachel's login. It was designed to look like a shocking act of negligence. To complete the frame-up, he fabricated a small piece of physical evidence. He found a sticky note with a complex server password written on it in Rachel's handwriting, which he expertly forgot in a trash bin near the terminal. It was the perfect setup. It painted a picture of a cleaning lady who, while snooping or being careless, had stumbled upon sensitive information and inadvertently caused a massive security crisis. The next morning, all hell broke loose. Alarms blared through the IT department. Norman was briefed on the major security breach, his face turning to stone as the evidence was laid out before him. The digital trail, the handwritten password. It all pointed to one person, Rachel Romero. Marcus presented the findings with feigned regret, painting a picture of a trusted employee who had made a catastrophic, unforgivable mistake. The betrayal Norman felt was immediate and absolute. He had allowed himself to respect her, to see her as something more. He had started to trust her. This evidence felt like a personal slap in the face, a confirmation of his old cynical worldview that you can't trust anyone. The jealous executive had perfectly played on Norman's deepest insecurities, turning his budding admiration for Rachel into fuel for a furious fire. The stage was set for a devastating confrontation. The kindness test was over, replaced by a trial by fire based on lies. The delicate, budding romance was about to be crushed under the weight of a vicious corporate plot. Marcus had handed Norman a reason to revert to his worst self, and Norman, blinded by a sense of personal betrayal, was about to take the bait. The rage that consumed Norman Robertson was volcanic. It wasn't just about a security breach, it was about his own vulnerability, which he now saw as a fatal weakness. He felt that Rachel had made a fool of him. He had opened a small crack in his armor for her, and she had, in his mind, driven a knife straight through it. He summoned her to his office, the same place where he was beginning to admire her and prepared to obliterate her. When Rachel entered, she could feel the Arctic chill. The warmth that had been growing between them was gone, replaced by an icy fury. "I trusted you," he began, his voice deceptively low and dangerous. He threw a file onto the desk, the fabricated evidence from Marcus. A security breach. From your login. Negligence of a kind that could ruin this company. Ruin me. What do you have to say for yourself? His words were accusations, not questions. Rachel looked at the evidence, her face calm but her eyes filled with a dawning understanding of the situation. She knew instantly she had been framed. "Norman, this isn't what it looks like," she started, her voice steady. "I didn't do this. Someone is setting me up." But he wasn't listening. He was too deep in his own sense of betrayal, too willing to believe the lie that fit his old, comfortable narrative of the untrustworthy subordinate. "Enough," he roared, standing up so abruptly his chair screeched back. "I don't want to hear your pathetic excuses. I gave you a second chance. I started to think you were different, that you were something special." Each word was a dagger. "But you're just like everyone else. Worse even. You're a liability hidden behind a quiet smile." He was reverting to the cruel billionaire who had fired her over a coaster, but this time it was laced with the venom of personal pain. He humiliated her in front of Marcus and another senior executive he had called in as witnesses. He tore apart her character, painting her as a careless, untrustworthy fool. He wouldn't let her speak, cutting her off every time she tried to explain. It was a brutal, emotional execution. "You're fired," he spat, the words dripping with contempt. "And this time, you won't be coming back. Get out of my building, now." This was more than a termination. It was an annihilation of the respect and trust that had started to build. The potential for a true love story was incinerated in the fire of his rage. He chose to believe the worst, to slam the door on the one person who had shown him a glimmer of something real. He was the rich man in his castle once more, safe behind his walls of anger and mistrust. Blinded by what he thought was righteous fury, he failed the most important kindness test of his life. He had been presented with a choice to trust the evidence of a person's character he had seen with his own eyes, or to trust the convenient lie that confirmed his biases. He chose the lie. And as Rachel turned to leave, he felt a familiar, ugly surge of power, not realizing it was the last time he would ever hold it over her. Rachel did not argue. She did not cry or plead her case. Faced with Norman's unshakable rage, she simply absorbed the verbal blows with a silence that was more powerful than any defense she could have mounted. She looked at him, and in her eyes, there was no fear or anger. There was only a deep, profound disappointment. It was a look that said, "I expected better from you," and it pierced through his fury like a shard of ice. She turned and walked out of his office with the same quiet dignity she had shown every single day. She didn't slam the door or offer a parting shot. Her exit was clean, quiet, and devastatingly final. The two executives in the room shifted uncomfortably, the raw emotion of the moment hanging heavy in the air. The drama was over, but the silence that followed was filled with the weight of what had just happened. As the door clicked shut, Norman's triumphant anger began to evaporate, replaced by an immediate and unsettling pang of regret. Her look of disappointment haunted him instantly. He had wanted her to fight, to scream, to prove she was the emotional, irrational person he had painted her to be. Her calm resignation was a surprise, a plot twist that left him feeling like the one who had lost control, not her. That single fleeting expression on her face replayed in his mind. It wasn't the look of a guilty person who had been caught. It was the look of a person who had placed a small amount of faith in someone, only to see it completely betrayed. For the first time, a sliver of doubt entered his mind. What if she was telling the truth? What if he had just made a terrible, irreversible mistake? The feeling was so strong it was physical, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. He had reverted to his worst self, the cruel and arrogant billionaire, and the momentary satisfaction was already turning to ash in his mouth. He had wanted to hurt her for betraying his trust, but her reaction made him feel like he had just betrayed something far more important within himself. It was a life-changing moment of self-awareness. He walked over to the window, watching as Rachel exited the building far below, a small, solitary figure disappearing into the bustling city. She didn't look back. The destiny of their connection, a thread he had just started to value, felt like it had been irrevocably severed by his own hand. The regret was sharp and bitter, a poison he had willingly administered to himself. He had won the battle, asserted his power, and removed the threat. But as he stood alone in his silent office, the rich man felt poorer than ever. The emotional cost of his victory was dawning on him, and he had a terrible sinking feeling that he had just fired the only person who could have saved him from himself. The unsettling regret Norman felt after firing Rachel festered into a full-blown obsession. He couldn't shake the image of her disappointed face. Driven by a doubt he couldn't voice, he secretly ordered a deep-dive forensic analysis of the security breach, telling his IT chief he wanted to build a stronger case for prosecution. In reality, he was looking for an answer, a confirmation that his brutal actions were justified. What he found was the opposite. The report landed on his desk 3 days later. It was a shocking document, a plot twist that turned his world upside down. The forensic team had recovered fragments of deleted code from the server logs. They revealed that the breach had been initiated using a sophisticated masking protocol, one far beyond the technical capabilities of a Maid. The trail didn't just point to Rachel's login, it showed that her credentials had been rerouted from another executive's workstation, Marcus Thorne's. The evidence was concrete, scientific, and undeniable. The report included a time-stamped security camera still from a hallway, showing Marcus at the shared terminal just minutes before the breach occurred. It also included a handwriting analysis of the password note, which concluded with 98% certainty that it was a forgery. Rachel was innocent. She hadn't just been mistaken, she had been maliciously and deliberately framed. The weight of his own cruelty crashed down on Norman with the force of a physical blow. He leaned back in his chair, the air leaving his lungs. Every single vicious word he had said to her echoed in his ears. He had called her a liar, a liability, a fool. He hadn't just fired her, he had emotionally destroyed her, all while she was the innocent victim of a corporate conspiracy. His judgment hadn't just been terrible, it had been unforgivable. This was his moment of redemption, or at least the horrifying beginning of the path toward it. He saw himself for what he was, a rich man so insulated by his own power and arrogance that he couldn't see the truth when it was standing right in front of him. He had failed her. He had failed the kindness test of a lifetime. The emotional devastation he felt was profound, a self-inflicted wound that cut deeper than any business loss. He felt a desperate, urgent need to find her, to apologize, to somehow undo the damage he had done. But what could he possibly say? How could he ask for forgiveness for a sin born of such profound prejudice and pride? The true love story that might have been, the connection he was just starting to feel, now seemed like a fantasy he had personally burned to the ground. The drama he now faced was entirely internal. It was the battle for his own soul. He had believed the worst lie because it was easier than believing in the best of someone. The shocking truth had been revealed, not just about Rachel's innocence, but about his own deeply flawed character. And now, he had to live with the consequences of his life-changing mistake. Norman Robertson, the billionaire who could locate any asset and acquire any company, was now faced with an impossible task, finding a single humble maid who had disappeared. His quest for redemption began with a frantic energy. He hired the best private investigators money could buy, commanding them to find Rachel Romero with an urgency that bordered on obsession. He needed to apologize, to see her face, and beg for the forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. The search quickly hit a series of dead ends. The investigators went to her last known address, the small, warm apartment that stood in such stark contrast to his own life. They found it empty, cleared out. She had moved the day after he fired her, leaving no forwarding address. The neighbors knew nothing, only that she had left quietly, without any drama. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. Days turned into a week, and the search grew more desperate. Norman poured millions into the effort, using every resource at his disposal. They checked flight manifests, train records, and financial transactions. But there was nothing. No credit card usage, no new bank accounts, no digital footprint. It was a shocking and complete disappearance. She had orchestrated her exit with a precision and foresight that baffled even the most seasoned investigators. He realized with a growing sense of dread that this was no ordinary departure. It was a deliberate erasure. She didn't want to be found, especially by him. This wasn't a plot twist, it was a consequence. He had pushed her away with such force that she had simply left the world he inhabited entirely. The quiet maid had a secret identity. After all, she was a ghost, able to disappear without a trace. The search became his personal torment. Every lead that went cold was another reminder of his cruelty. He drove through the city at night, looking at faces in the crowds, hoping for a miracle, for a glimpse of her. The city, which had always felt like his kingdom, now felt like a labyrinth hiding the one person who mattered. This desperate hunt was not just about finding her, it was about finding a piece of his own humanity he had lost. He was a rich man humbled by a profound loss. He would have given up half his fortune just to have 5 minutes to tell her he was sorry, to explain that he knew the truth. His obsession with finding her was fueled by the nascent feelings of true love he had only just begun to acknowledge. How could he have a love story with a woman who had ceased to exist? His investigators finally came to him with a grim conclusion. It's like she never was. Mr. Robertson, whoever she is, or was, she's a professional at being invisible. The words hit Norman with the finality of a death sentence. His chance for redemption seemed to be gone. His destiny, it appeared, was to live with the crushing weight of his actions, haunted by the memory of the woman he had wronged so terribly. While Norman was consumed by his fruitless search for Rachel, a storm was gathering on the financial horizon. He had taken his eye off the ball, his focus fractured by guilt and regret. It was in this moment of distraction that a predator struck. A mysterious investment firm, operating with shocking speed and precision, began buying up massive blocks of Robertson Industries stock. Before Norman's board could even mount a defense, it was too late. The hostile takeover was a masterpiece of corporate warfare. It was swift, silent, and brutally effective. Norman, the titan of industry, had been outmaneuvered. He received a cold, formal notice his company had a new majority shareholder. He was being summoned to an emergency board meeting to meet the powerful new owner, the secret billionaire who now controlled the empire he had spent his life building. The news sent a shockwave through the company. The drama was palpable. Who was this mysterious buyer? No one had ever heard of Romero Acquisitions. They had come out of nowhere, a ghost in the financial world, and had swallowed one of the largest corporations in the country whole. Norman felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. He had lost control. The power he had wielded with such arrogance had been stripped from him in a matter of days. He prepared for the meeting with a sense of dread. He was about to face the person who had dismantled his life's work. He imagined some ruthless rival, a corporate raider he had crossed in the past, now back for revenge. He steeled himself for a confrontation, for a final, humiliating battle for the scraps of his company. His personal quest for redemption would have to wait. His professional survival was now on the line. The walk to the boardroom was the longest of his life. He passed the anxious faces of his executives, the very people he had ruled with an iron fist. Now they all looked to him for answers, and for the first time he had none. The rich man was about to be humbled, to be put in the same position he had put so many others in, at the mercy of a new, more powerful owner. It was a cruel and ironic plot twist of fate. He thought of Rachel. He wondered what she would think if she could see him now, stripped of his power, facing his own corporate execution. The takeover felt like a karmic punishment, a price he had to pay for his sins. Destiny, it seemed, had a flair for the dramatic. The loss of his company felt intrinsically linked to the loss of her, two life-changing events converging into a single moment of reckoning. He reached the boardroom doors, took a deep breath, and pushed them open. He was ready to face his conqueror, to meet the faceless billionaire who had brought him to his knees. But no amount of preparation could have readied him for the surprise that was waiting for him on the other side. The shocking truth of who now owned him was about to be revealed. The air in the boardroom was thick with tension. Norman's entire executive team was assembled, their faces a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. All eyes were on the large chair at the head of the table, which was turned away from them, facing the expansive window overlooking the city. As Norman walked in, the chair slowly swiveled around, and time stopped. He was left utterly, completely speechless. Sitting there, in the seat of absolute power, was Rachel Romero. She was not the humble maid he had fired. She was transformed. Dressed in a sharp, elegant power suit, her hair styled impeccably, she radiated an aura of calm, unshakable authority. The woman he had humiliated was now the secret billionaire who owned everything. The plot twist was so shocking, so impossibly audacious, that Norman's mind struggled to process the reality of what he was seeing. It was the ultimate surprise, a moment that shattered his entire perception of the world. A collective gasp went through the room. Marcus Thorne, the executive who had framed her, turned a ghostly white, looking as if he was about to collapse. Rachel's gaze swept across the stunned faces of the executives who had ignored or belittled her, finally landing on Norman. Her expression was not one of gloating or revenge. It was the same calm, observant look she had always had, but now it was backed by the weight of a multi-billion-dollar empire. "Good morning, gentlemen," Rachel said, her voice clear and steady, resonating with a power no one in that room had ever heard from her. "I am Rachel Romero, the founder and CEO of Romero Acquisitions. And as of this morning, I am the majority shareholder of this company. Your new boss." Her secret identity was out, and the reversal of power was absolute. The maid was now the master. The drama was more potent than anything Shakespeare could have written. Norman could only stare, his mind reeling. Every memory of her, every interaction, was now cast in a new, brilliant light. The anonymous note, her grace under pressure, her mysterious disappearance. It all made sense now. She hadn't been a maid playing at being intelligent, she had been a billionaire playing at being a maid. Her entire time with him had been an undercover operation, a life-changing ruse of epic proportions. The emotional impact on Norman was seismic. It was a mix of awe, shame, and a bizarre sense of relief. The woman he had been desperately searching for was here. But she was not the victim he had imagined rescuing. She was a powerhouse, a force of nature who had just conquered his world. Their love story, if it was ever to be, would not be one of a rich man saving a poor girl, but of two equals meeting in the wreckage of his collapsed pride. He finally understood. Her disappearance wasn't an act of fear, it was a strategic retreat before a final decisive move. The woman he fired now had the power to fire him. The destiny he thought he controlled had been in her hands all along. The ultimate kindness test had concluded, and the shocking results were now in. Rachel let the shocking silence hang in the air for a moment before she began to speak. "For the last year, I have been undercover inside this company," she explained, her voice calm and measured. "My father was a kind, brilliant man who built a small tech firm that Robertson Industries acquired and then dismantled, ruining him in the process. Before I took this company apart from the outside, I had to know what it was on the inside. I had to know if the man who inherited it had any decency, any heart." She looked directly at Norman. "It was all a kindness test," she said, her words resonating with everyone in the room. "I needed to see if you were capable of valuing a person for their character rather than their status. I needed to see if there was a soul inside the billionaire." She recounted every event: the firing, the dinner party, the lost document, the anonymous note. She then turned her gaze to Marcus Thorne. And I needed to see the character of your team. Marcus, you're fired. Security will escort you out. The drama was absolute. With a few calm words, she had asserted her authority and delivered a swift, decisive blow of justice. Then, she turned her attention back to Norman, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. The floor is yours, Norman. What do you have to say? The entire boardroom held its breath. This was it. The final test. His job, his future, his very character were on the line, to be judged by the woman he had so profoundly wronged. Norman stepped forward, his eyes locked on hers. He didn't look at the board members. He didn't care about them. In that moment, there were only two people in the room. I don't want my job back, he said, his voice thick with an emotion no one had ever heard from him. I'm not here to apologize for a business. I'm here to apologize for being a man who was blind. This was his moment of true redemption. I failed to see you, Rachel. Not just your intelligence or your strength, but your worth as a human being. I was arrogant, cruel, and unworthy of the kindness you showed me, even when I was at my worst. He took a deep breath, his apology raw and public. The biggest mistake of my life wasn't a bad business deal. It was looking at a queen and only seeing a maid. For that, for the pain I caused you, I am truly and deeply sorry. A single tear traced a path down Rachel's cheek. It was not a tear of sadness, but of catharsis. This was the apology she had been waiting for. Not an apology to the billionaire who owned him, but to the woman he had hurt. It was proof that the man she saw glimpses of, the man who could be saved, was real. His heartfelt words were the final piece of their life-changing love story. A story that began with him firing her and now, hopefully, would continue with her hiring him, in a way. She stood up and walked toward him. Redemption is a powerful thing, Norman, she said softly. Perhaps there's a place for you in this new company after all. And perhaps, she added, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time, there's a chance for a new story to begin for us. It was a second chance, born from a shocking plot twist of destiny, and the promise of a true love that was more valuable than any empire. This story is a powerful reminder that a person's true worth is never defined by their job title or their bank account. It's written in their character. Norman learned that the hard way, and Rachel proved that kindness isn't a weakness, it's the ultimate superpower, a force that can change destiny itself. If you also believe that everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are, and that integrity is the greatest asset of all, then you've found your community. You belong here with us. Subscribe to this channel and join a family that celebrates stories of redemption and hidden strength. Now let's make some noise. Hit the like button to spread this message of hope and to show the world that kindness matters. In the comments below, tell us about a time you, or someone you know, was completely underestimated. Let's fill this space with stories of surprising strength. And finally, share this video with one person who needs to be reminded that current situation doesn't define their destiny. And while you wait for our next story, know that this channel is a treasure chest filled with emotional journeys just like this one. Explore our library of videos and discover other unforgettable tales of love, revenge, and redemption. You never know what hidden gem you'll find. To make sure you don't miss any of the incredible stories we have coming, be sure to activate that notification bell. You won't want to be left out of the next emotional roller coaster. We can't wait to see you again.